keep this party going so we can get into our holiday and our extended weekend. I want to thank everyone for attending, hopping on the line, watching live, whatever it might be. We're going to wave at you because we really can't hear anybody in terms of that space. But without further ado, we're going to kick off our webinar today. I thank you very much for taking the time. The focus today is in terms of upgrading your sales and marketing toolbox, very specifically for our financial services clients. And I'd like to welcome you. We're going to get into some high-level things this morning in terms of introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT and AI tools, maximizing marketing ROI, what that looks like right now based upon the current landscape of automation, ChatGPT, and some of those low-hanging fruits that might be able to help you progress more in terms of promoting your insurance company, your wealth management practice, as well as banks and credit unions, how you can adapt and what we're seeing in the market today. We're also going to talk about optimizing sales efficiencies very specifically, and then we're going to recap and give an opportunity for some questions. Without further ado, I'm gonna give the other folks on the call an opportunity to speak. Hi, I'm Danny Laws. I am the principal owner of DeBryan Marketing Group. We've been in business plus 15 years. In terms of financial services space, I started off my career in financial services, in insurance, in banking, working and interning for organizations such as State Farm in the insurance department there. Then transitioned over to Santander, which used to be known as Sovereign Bank, working in the marketing department there, promoting products, financial services products and services, and then transitioning over to the agency space, working with organizations like National Pen, now BB&T, a number of credit unions, as well as advisors that we work with here at DeBryan Marketing Group in terms of brand awareness, lead generation, and sales. That is our primary focus with those audiences. Next, in terms of speaker today, we have Nicole. Nicole, if you want to say a few words and a little bit about your background and what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me in this webinar today. I'm really excited to be a part of it, but I am from the HubSpot world. I work with Danny as his partner development manager. My background a lot has been in sales, but I actually started out my career as a rep in the financial services industry as well. So it's nice to bring that experience to the table in our conversation for today. But that's a little bit about myself. I'm here to just chat through with you how HubSpot can help some of those sales efficiencies that you might be looking to accomplish. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you for participating. And now, Mike.
Hey everybody, I'm Mike Sanders. I'm the digital marketing manager here at DeBryan. Been in sales and marketing space for 20 years. After getting my MBA, came to DeBryan, and ever since then I've led the team. One of the many hats I wear is the content manager. So we work with a number of clients in the financial services industry. And as part of that, we design emails, we design monthly content, we help with website development, marketing strategy. And as part of that role, we've started to rely increasingly on AI tools. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, how you can leverage those AI tools in your business.
Thanks, guys. With that being said, kind of laying the foundation here, financial services is a very competitive space. We see that in terms of the cost per click in Google Ads and the number and the money that is the number of financial services companies in the US, as well as the gross domestic product, ranges. As you can see here, we're talking about 982,000 businesses in the United States, and that's growing, that's evolving, that's also merging. We're seeing some of those in terms of the mergers, acquisitions, partnerships in the space now. We're also seeing, some changes in employment. 6.3 million in terms of employees in the financial services space in the US, and we're talking about $1.5 trillion in gross domestic product from financial services. And you can see some of the resources of that information here today. With that being said, I'm going to transition it over to Mike Sanders to talk a little bit about ChatGPT and AI tools?
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. So I'm going to talk today. I'm going to say ChatGPT, but you can assume ChatGPT is any AI tool. We get asked that question a lot. Hey, have you used Bing AI? Have you used Claude? Have you used Jasper? They all accomplish similar things. We're going to talk about what they do today. Depending on what month it is, one might be a little bit better than the other. Really depends on how frequently they upgrade their algorithm as to which one might be the best at a particular day. But for our purposes, we can assume they're interchangeable. And to me, this is really exciting. These AI tools can make your life a lot easier. You can produce better content. You can reach more people, and you can do it a lot more efficiently. And I think the two main things I want to convey today about these tools are, one, I think you need to understand the way the industry is moving. Okay, I think it's imperative to understand what the landscape looks like. But I think secondly, there are some actionable steps you can take for how to utilize these AI tools in your own business moving forward. So those are really the two key areas we're going to focus on. When you look at the space, you have a number of challenges. There's growth. You constantly need to be bringing in new leads, new customers. There's obviously aligning everything you're doing, which is increasingly difficult with people working from home. You don't have necessarily have a team in the office anymore, so you have to make sure everything you're doing is consistent. You have to communicate with more people on more channels than ever before. And obviously, much more of what you're doing is digital now when you're talking about either marketing or operations. So those are some of the key challenges. We could certainly add, rules and regulations to that for people in financial industry. Still some hiring glitches going on where it's tougher to get good people. But, really the four key challenges we're going to focus on here today are these four that are on there. We're going to talk about how AI tools can help you kind of meet those challenges. We have a quote on here, and just in general, technology is moving ahead, and you've got to understand the technology. You've got to integrate the technology. You have to know what your competitors are doing. If you don't, you're going to get lapped. Okay. The graphic on the right, I think, is interesting. It shows just how important growth is in the future. Obviously, as long as there have been businesses, we've needed to bring in new customers, but I think more and more with the turnover that we find in space and people jumping between, different banks, different firms, if you're not growing, you're probably going to get left behind. The financial advisory people we work with talk about their customers aging out, or their book of business aging out. You need to replace the people that are moving on. So, what we want to talk about today is this 88% of people in your space are focusing on growth. How can we leverage these tools to try to bring more leads in and ultimately more customers? The first of the three, I'm going to talk about how to use these AI tools in three different domains. The first, and I think the biggest impact to the industry, is going to be when it comes to chatbots. Okay, on the right you can see examples of some poorly designed chatbots. You can look at the interaction there. You can see what we currently have in the industry is very closed, and what that means is the chatbots are mostly designed that we upload information into them that exists on the website or on the back end of the website. And when your customers are coming to use those chatbots, they're kind of limited to whatever is within your website. Okay, so the chatbots are essentially FAQs that are interactive. They can't learn, they can't improve, and they, for the most part, don't go off script. Okay, that's very different from the way the industry is moving. The industry is moving to these generative AI chatbots, and what they're going to be able to do is they're going to be able to learn. They're going to be able to record, in essence, the last interaction with that particular customer. They're going to be able to draw on other interactions with customers. They're going to be able to go outside of your website to other websites to pull information in to give a more comprehensive answer. Now, obviously in financial industry, there are some concerns there with regulations, with recording customer data. People get concerned about, okay, well, if it's going outside of our website, we can't control it. How do we know that the recommendation that's being given meets with our approval. That's really what they're, trying to work out. But, ultimately, these generative AI tools are going to be able to help your customers do a lot more than they can currently do, right? They're gonna allow you to explain financial concepts. They're going to help them budget. They're going to be able to answer difficult questions, right? Right now, when you put into a chatbot, what is a Roth IRA? They can spit that answer out. What they can't do, but what they will be able to do within a year is, given my financial circumstances, should I have a traditional IRA or should I open a Roth IRA? It's gonna the generative AI is gonna search the internet for answers. It's gonna probably prompt some follow-up questions from the person asking to make that determination, but it's gonna give some general recommendation that is personalized to the person asking it. That's the direction that the industry is moving in. So you need to be prepared for that. It's also important to know that it's going to align with your CRM. So if you have a robust CRM system, you need to make sure you're putting information into that, because it's going to draw on that information so that everything aligns across all your different channels. Okay. And I often get asked, what's the timeline on this? This conversion, when can we expect this to roll out? I would expect the major players, the Wells Fargos of the world, the Allies, to have generative AI probably by the end of this year. And then you can expect the usual trickle-down effects with technology, where it goes from national banks down to regional banks and finally down to credit unions. Financial advisors, insurance firms, they're usually a little slower to adapt to new technologies. They tend to be a little bit more one-on-one relationship based. But that's also coming in that space probably within 3 years. So I think you need to be prepared for that and understand that's the direction that the industry is moving. That being said, if we move on to the next slide, what I just covered was for the most part out of your control. You're going to have to wait for the industry to bring those prepackaged bots in and then get them customized for your business. I think the way you can use ChatGPT today to improve your business is in terms of content creation. So the first area I want to focus on is content creation that I would call static content. That would be content that's going on your website and or blogs. So static meaning, you're doing it once and it's kind of up there. ChatGPT, for the most part, can help you do anything. I find it most helpful for creating outlines. And the reason for that is when you're writing new content, you have to do a lot of research, okay? In my role, we work with people in financial services. That could be banks, that could be insurers, that could be financial advisors. I have to learn really quickly what's going on about each of those spaces when I'm writing for those customers, okay? What ChatGPT does is essentially removes that research component. It's doing the research for me. It's scraping every blog that's ever been written, every website that's out there that's reputable, and it's collating all that great research together and giving you in bite-sized chunks. Here are the most important pieces, okay? I find it really helpful for outlines because basically it's skipping that research step. It's giving you the outline. Here's what you should write about in that area. And then working off of the outline, you can add your own voice, you can add your own tone, your own, informal language, so that doesn't seem very stilted. People try to use ChatGPT to do everything, to write the blog, to write the web page. I think it's pretty clear that it was written by AI. The format tends to be very sterile. If you ever look at something from ChatGPT, one way to tell these tools is the sentence length. They tend to all be 20 to 25 words in a sentence. They all tend to end in nouns. And that's because they all had rules fed into them that this is the proper way to write. So each sentence tends to look the same way. They also repeat language a lot and tend not to pull from more than 4 or 5 sources. So I find it useful to skip the research step and then build an outline and then use kind of your own language moving forward from there. What's important is what's called prompt structure, okay? And I have the equation on here that helps you remember exactly how to prompt things in. The shorthand is, acting as role X for format task Y in format Z. Okay, and so the examples on there, so I might say, you know, acting as a financial advisor, write a outline for a 1,500 word blog. Okay, so that prompt structure is going to ensure that you get the correct information that you want to convey to the customer. You can add to that some other components. You can say in an educational tone, or you can say in an informal tone. You can add more things such as, you know, relying on citations, and please give the citations. For the most part, the more you give it in terms of the input, the better quality the output's going to be. So don't just plug something into one of these tools and expect the first response you get to be ideal. Sort of play around with it, you know, make your prompt longer, try it in a few different ways to see which output you prefer, okay, for the most part. But in general, I think the takeaway here is if you're not using these tools, you should try them out, start a free account before you go with premium. You know, plug in a few prompts, play around with it, and see how it can help you make your life a little easier and a little more efficient, and really reduce the amount of research time you have to do before presenting content. The third component I want to focus on here is with ChatGPT and emails. Okay, Danny, you can go on to the next slide. The key to using these tools well is to try to break everything down into smaller components. If you do everything in one prompt, you're going to get a really general output. So you don't want to say, hey, ChatGPT, acting as a sales rep in the credit union space, write me a email campaign to prospects, right? That's too general. You're going to get a very general output. What you want to do is you want to break that down, and then you want to iterate. So you want to start with, you know, first you want to start with feeding your campaign brief in. If you give the campaign brief, you're going to get something that's consistent with how you usually use language, your tone, your branding, your messaging. But what you generally want to do is, hey, for the campaign, outline what this campaign is going to look like. Then once you get your outline for what the campaign is going to look like, then you say, okay, well, I now have the outline. ChatGPT remembers that it gave you an outline. Now you say, okay, for the outline, compose email number 1 for me, okay, using the campaign brief. Then once you get email number 1, what you're going to say is, okay, now that you've created email number 1, write me a subject line for email number 1. And actually take it one step further and say, write me 2 subject lines so that I can A/B test which subject line works best. You know, in general, what you're trying to do is just break each component down to discrete increments so that you can get a more specific response out of ChatGPT. You know, ultimately, if you do each of those steps, what you end up doing is you're just relying on the system to look at all the other email campaigns that are out there. What is everyone else doing? What is the best demonstrated practice? And you're allowing it to create that structure for you, since it's a proven structure that works. But by loading that campaign brief in, you're making sure that it's using the template that works, but it's also using your language, your branding, your priorities with whatever email campaign that it's spitting out. Okay. You know, with that said, all these tools are meant to make you more efficient and ultimately more effective. When you combine efficiency and effectiveness together, what you get is return on investment. And I'm going to pass the baton to Danny, who's going to talk a little bit more about some other techniques that you can use to improve your ROI in marketing.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing in terms of financial services we want to talk about is maximizing marketing ROI. And having spent some time in that space, you know, I always think back to my days in working for organizations, and in many cases, more than 50% of financial institutions do not measure ROI or measure it less than 25% of their campaigns, based upon the fact that most banks, credit unions, mortgage companies are based upon percentages. And I always find it interesting that they're not measuring the work. I think this has been fairly consistent and evolving over time because of the challenges in the space, in particular for financial services, in terms of adapting to new markets, new platforms, new technology, the expanding needs of their target audience, and transitioning of wealth specifically from the boomers to the next generations is something that we often see. So there's a lot of things in flux. I think in terms of considering maximizing ROI, the first recommendation would be investing in organic search and rankings. And when we start to think about this in terms of financial services, we're talking about from an organic and local perspective, most of that is still happening at the local level. When you get a mortgage loan, it's usually at the local level. There's a relationship there between that and the realtor, those types of things. So keep in mind that one of the highest return on investments, as you can see here, is SEO. And the average ROI on a well-executed SEO campaign is 275%. Why? SEO is more labor intensive, right? We're talking about the technology on the back end of the site. We're talking about content development. We're talking about link earning, which is predicated on content, which Mike just gave you a number of recommendations that you can repurpose to develop effective content. What you don't see from an SEO perspective in many cases is the incremental cost or additional cost. For example, when you compare SEO to Google Ads, you're generally paying for someone to manage those ads, and then you're paying Google. So the ability to get ROI is a little bit different in terms of the context of SEO. So what we really want to talk about in terms of SEO right now are some of the exciting changes that Google's going through. Many of you have been working with voice search through mobile devices. A lot of this information has evolved over time. I think the same thing can be said about Google. So what we want to focus on is supercharging the search for generative AI. And what I mean by generative AI is Google's rolling out these modifications where some of the AI related content is built into the search, into what you would traditionally see on the search engine results page. So a lot of that are going to be widgets on the right hand side that you traditionally wouldn't have seen in search, right? You're also going to look at a number of different components in terms of drop downs, which we're going to show you here momentarily. But I think the three main takeaways from Google's SGE platform is the ability to serve up content in a unique way, which is what Mike alluded to earlier in terms of what it can do. So number one, answer questions that are more complex and more descriptive. So as Mike talked about developing that content, keep that particular piece in mind. He used the example of Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. And so what types of questions are you going to ask the search engines, or would a customer ask the search engines to pull up that information? When you're thinking about that, you're going to see it more in the search engine results and as follow-up information in the search engine results. The second piece is providing relevant topics faster to customers, whether it be in the chat box or whether it be in the search engines. You're going to want to provide that in a level that makes sense for them. When we say content, we're not simply speaking to written content. For us at the Bryan Marketing Group, that's video, that's imagery, that is also the text that's there. So you want to be able to serve this content up, relevant content for that audience, whether you're looking to acquire, someone from a mortgage perspective, whether you're looking for credit, for debt consolidation, whether you're looking for new loans. You want to be able to serve up answers to their questions in many facets. And then the other component is to ask the conversational follow-ups. Know that they're happening, as Mike said, similar to the chat bots, that series of questioning often happens on the search engines. When you put in a search in Google and you don't get what you want, there's usually a secondary or a follow-up to that. So you want to be thinking about this from a content development perspective. And so as we're talking about this, this is a classic example in terms of what generative AI is serving up in terms of Google and the search engine results. So now you've asked a basic question, what's better for a family with kids under 3 and a dog? It gives you the generative AI component that shows up top, right? This is an actual search result. You're actually seeing the secondary information to the right-hand side, which traditionally may or may not have been there. And then you've also got the follow-up questions that are listed on the bottom. Ask follow-up questions. So what you see is how long to spend at this particular location, how many days do you need? Those are some of the follow-up questions that are already built into the system. So if you can provide the answers to similar questions, as Mike alluded to, what's better in terms of a Roth IRA? What's the rate of return, on some of those platforms? What's a better option and why would be some of those follow-up questions that you want to be aware of in this particular context, right? The other component speaks to another example of this in terms of the search, clicking on the search and results. It's happening before they even get to what we would traditionally refer to as the search engine results page. You're looking at post-purchase behavior as an example. It gives you a clear definition. It gives you follow-up questions. So when we say the same thing in terms of Roth IRA versus traditional IRA, the same concept holds true, that you're going to start to see things that are populating before it actually gets to the local maps, before it gets to what we refer to as the first 3 spots of the search engines, and then getting into the content rankings that are there, right? So these things are happening before you get to what we would traditionally see in the search engine results. There's a lot more to this that's happening, but I felt like these were the most realistic examples that you can see: studies, definitions, examples from thought leaders that are all populating as resources to some of these elements, and those questions and the ability to respond and create content that's worth sharing and talking about is going to be pivotal. The other piece here that we want to take into account, and this is very important in terms of financial services, because there's a lot of skepticism. In my day, we used to have this vernacular: a bank is a bank is a bank, a credit union is a credit union is a credit union. They're all the same, right? And so creating an experience, reinforcing expertise, reinforcing your authority and trustworthiness in terms of content are important. So when you're creating content, and you want to show up in the search engine results, we want to think about your experience. And that could be very niche. Case in point, wealth management, right? If you have experience managing financial services or investments for divorcees, that is often a niche in the advisor space. For women that are divorced, what do they do when they have to manage the money and they're coming out of a relationship and having to transition to not having someone accountable and responsible for managing the money or the household? Now they're on their own. You having a specific experience helps with that, right? So we want to also showcase that. We want to talk about expertise. What certifications or accreditations do you have in terms of expertise, right? We also want to talk about the authority in terms of that space. Are you an authority on the topic? Are you speaking to those particular components? Do you have testimonials, reviews, those types of things to reinforce the authority and trustworthiness? And do you have what we often refer to in our space as social proof of what you're speaking to in terms of providing financial services that are commensurate with someone's expectations? What does that look like? So when you're putting that together, you want to be thinking about that, creating that experience from soup to nuts, right? in terms of some of those components. I think this slide here, talking about improving conversion rates and the user experience, right? When we're talking about improving these components, it comes full circle from a financial services perspective, and not just that. I think it's universal in my opinion, right? When you are working with a customer, you want to talk about your digital experience and your physical experience when you're dealing with mortgage company, when you're dealing with a credit union, when you're dealing with our financial advisors. Some of those conversations are not happening digitally. So the experience that you have in a call center and a branch then translates into ideally that mobile and that online experience. What's the UI? What's the user experience? What level of expectation did we set for the customer to make it easier for them to convert? Right? What did we tell them? What was the onboarding process? What did we talk about from the mobile banking? That's not a one size fits all. As an example, the mobile banking experience from one bank versus a credit union might be vastly different in terms of how they set that up. And so you want to make sure that we are taking into account the physical experience in terms of at location, the digital experience, the mobile experience in terms of those components, and talking about how we're looking at the financial services products and services that we're communicating across the board. So that can mean better content, right? As Mike alluded to, answering their questions, whether it be in the chat box or via the search engines. And that can mean a overall better user experience on desktop and mobile in particular, because from my financial services perspective, we are checking our statements. Our statements are electronic now. They're coming through in terms of an email. We're checking our banking accounts. We're checking how our investments are functioning. We have a number of different ways at our fingertips to evaluate what's happening. So we want to make sure that those opportunities are maximized from a user experience. And what I find is that the better the user experience, the greater the probability of converting. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing that user experience and making our customers happy so that they then in turn convert, leverage our online tools, create some efficiencies, and make it easier for you to satisfy your customers with the ancillaries that come along the way. So takeaway here in terms of this, in terms of the SEO component, when we're talking about maximizing ROI, as an example, we talked about the SEO components, right? Put together a budget for that SEO campaign, right? The other piece is execute and measure the ROI. On our site, under our resources, we have an on-page SEO template to get you started on a content development campaign specifically for SEO. You can see that tool. It's free of charge. Download it. The easiest way to access it is on our site under blog and resources. You'll be able to get to that and help you there. And then adapt your campaign based upon data. Evaluate what is effective, evaluate what is not effective and how you can improve on it. And take into account, I've been saying this for years, standard today, mediocrity tomorrow. There's an opportunity cost associated with a lot of the things that Mike's talking about. Mike talked about the chatbots and evaluating and doing something in that space. I'm talking about the SEO campaigns and measuring marketing. There's a cost associated with not selecting an option here and not proceeding down the path. There's going to be major market competitors that are going to move. You're going to have your mid-sized businesses that are going to be able to move, and you're going to get left behind if you are not proactively executing some of the things that we're talking about. Whether you're executing or testing it or figuring out how it's going to work for you, you are going to get left behind. This technology boom was spun on its head with COVID, and there's a lot more things that are happening than what you traditionally see. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to speak a little bit about the other elements.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danny. So we really talk about all of these different marketing efforts that we can start working on. And as that starts to drum up, businesses for us, we need to be able to convert that business, right? There's no, you can do as much marketing efforts as you can, but if our sales team is not taking the work that's being done by these marketing efforts and campaigns that we're building out, then there's no profit to be had, right? But according to research, on average, our sales reps are spending only 41% of their average workday not selling, right? That is absolutely mind-blowing at this point in time. We need our sales folks to be focusing on what they are there for, which is to convert all of these amazing opportunities that are coming down the pipeline. But why is that the case, right? Their time is really taken up by updating systems, manual admin tasks, manual outreach, like Mike had mentioned, doing the research just so that you can put together a sales template, right? Our sales team are working on disparate systems that don't allow for that efficiency to really take into place. And they have systems that don't really support their selling motions, right? So as an individual contributor, do you know where you're spending most of your time? And as a leader, do you know where your team is spending most of their time, right? Do you have a system in place that allows you to track all of these prospecting activities that needs to be had in order for those opportunities that our marketing team is bringing down to the pipeline, right? But why is it important to know? Danny, we can move on to the next slide. Prospecting activities are leading indicators to the health of your pipeline, right? And if you're not spending time on the right activities, at the end of the day, it's going to hurt the bottom line, and we can't bring that ROI back to the table based on all of these beautiful, amazing tactics that Danny and Mike had shared with us today. So what can we do in order to flip the script and take action, right? Having a workspace to centralize your focus is going to allow to reduce the outside noise. So Danny, on the next slide, we can see here how HubSpot as a tool might potentially allow you to do that, right? But what does a good workspace for our sales teams look like today? A good workspace should give you visibility into your book of business, right? Who are your existing customers at this point in time? And who are those net new opportunities that you might be able to go after? Your workspace should also give you visibility into the different stages of your prospecting activities and see where your existing customers are in their life cycle as well too. It should allow you to see your next follow-up task, segments your leads so that you can properly prioritize your outreach and go after those folks that are ready to engage with you and ready to take on those talks about financial services, right? We really want to make sure that we have the ability to meet them where they are at, but we can't do that if the system that we're currently working on is only putting more noise into our plate, right? So your sales team should have a central homepage in which they can see all of the tasks that is relevant for them to complete. They should have the ability to prioritize their lead and also manage their existing book of business, right? And as Mike had talked about, how can we leverage AI tools to increase our productivity? On our next slide, we'll see that our sales organization and other sales reps are really seeing an impact in using AI and automation to increase their productivity on day-to-day work, right? 81% of folks mentioned that it helps them save on manual tasks. It allows them to be more efficient into their roles. But most importantly, these AI tools are going to help you to create a more personalized experience with the folks that you are reaching out to. This graphic on the right-hand side really showcases how easily HubSpot pulls some of those generative AI tools in-app to make it easy for you to create a template for outreach, right? You can simply put a prompt in there. What are you selling? Who are you selling to, and and how many words do you want to communicate this, and what type of tone, right, are you trying to encompass into this message? Mike talked a lot about structuring your prompts in the way that you can leverage them in the AI tools to be more effective. That's one of the hardest magic, I would say, that us as end users are having a difficult time with using these ChatGPT tools, right? But what's really nice about HubSpot is it does allow you to just, build in those prompts in a very simple manner that's easily for you to type in there, right? So using AI and automation in your day-to-day to create sales templates that might be that you can leverage for A/B testing in your sales emails and sales outreach, and automating those sendings so that you don't have to take time out of your day to build out all of these touch points, right? Coming from a sales background, that research that Mike had talked about, in order for me to convey that messaging across to my prospects and even my existing customers, it could take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours, right? Who has time for that these days? Like Danny had mentioned, we need to be able to meet our customers and our prospects at where they're at, and the landscape is continuously changing, and we need to pivot even faster, right? And on our next slide, I think this is one of the most interesting things to note is on average, right? On average, 33% of sales reps are only having about 2 to 4 touch points towards a potential prospect or opportunity. Prospecting is a process that requires multiple touch points. In reality, and by research, it takes at least 12 touch points to turn a prospect into a sale. So if you are only doing 2 to 4 touch points, you are leaving money on the table, right? And the work that our marketing team and the efforts that they're doing with these campaigns cannot be measured if we just have 2 to 4 touch points with one single prospect. But we talk about how much time it takes to get that done. Who has time to put together 10 to 12 touch points and make sure that it's being done? What HubSpot allows you to do is create those sequences and those steps to be automatically automated so that you can put all of that into autopilot, increase your conversion rates, and make sure that you are staying top of mind to the prospects that you're working with at the right time as well. So next slide, what HubSpot really allows you to do is to standardize that automation, right? It allows you to collect and organize the data that you are capturing, whether that is through your marketing efforts, whether that's through form collection, and really create that personal experience for the folks that you're talking to at the end of the day. It allows for the unification of your marketing and sales efforts to really come together. And one of those challenges we talked about today was that alignment piece, right? In order for this process to really come together, our marketing and our sales teams need to be aligned and collaborating and not fighting alongside with one another so that we can close more deals and increase revenue by having all of our teams on the same page. What HubSpot CRM also allows you to do is share content between those different teams that are working together, so you're not spending time coming out of your inbox, going to another different tool, just so that you have all of that information together. right? And the last thing that I want to leave you off with in terms of what can you do to also increase that revenue is by upselling and cross-selling into your existing customer base, right? We shouldn't forget our existing customers. In the next slide, you'll be seeing an example of what potential automation could look like by nurturing our current customers, right? Your book of business is your lowest hanging fruit for creating opportunities. Nurturing these relationships is the most important goal that you do have, and it requires you to maintain it right at the initial point of sale. So you as a rep are now working on net new opportunities, and now you also have to think about your existing opportunities in your current client base. That's a lot of work. Let automation take that work off of your plate and build a nurturing campaign so that you can automate future activities. Your existing customer base can receive newsletters, financial trends that might be important to them, learning materials that you can be sending out on a monthly or quarterly basis so that they can stay engaged and keep you top of mind when those opportunities and life situation happens that they need to change their financial standings, right? They know that you are the right person that I should be reaching out to. And the only way that you can stay top of mind to them is continuing that message across all of the different platforms at where our customers might be living. So at the end of the day, these different tactics that we talk about will really empower you to create a better customer experience that results in stronger relationships, more productive conversations, and shorter sales cycles. So with that, I leave you with HubSpot really giving you the ability to use your customer data to grow your bottom line. These tools will allow you to have deeper insights into the prospects that you might be working with. Most importantly, automate that busy work to keep you focused on getting the deals closed and talking to the prospects and spending the right time and focusing on the right activities. And I'll bring it back down to Danny to close us off for a recap.
So in terms of recap, we want to talk about aligning your content with your marketing strategy, your content strategy, using ChatGPT tools to write to one persona. Coming from Mr. Sanders, we want to make sure that we're connecting prospects, leads, and customer service for optimal efficiency to attract, engage, and retain your financial services customers in every aspect. And as Nicole alluded to, that should also be cross-selling and upselling and nurturing those folks along the way, right? We want to market consistently for higher ROI, brand awareness, loyalty, efficiency, and learn what works to improve the results is what this is all about. That includes testing some of these ideas that we talked about today, from ChatGPT to looking at SEO and some of the changes that are happening in the space, to automating your sales follow-up and outreach from a financial services perspective. Item number 4, in terms of maximizing sales outreach effectiveness through strategic implementation of AI and automation. This can be done on a number of different platforms, and pure transparency. You know, Nicole is one of our partners in terms of HubSpot. We use a number of different tools and work with clients to automate in a number of different ways that even integrate with HubSpot. So keep that in mind, that these AI tools are all over the place. Automation is available throughout the process, and that could be everything from your follow-up to your chat bots, to your sales process, to your content development, to those workflows that are available there. So when we're talking about these things today, don't just isolate it to one variable. Think about it more holistically. And then the last component is measure your strategies in terms of marketing, sales, customer service to improve efficiency, effectiveness, and scalability. And with that being said, we've got 5 minutes, and it looks like most people are on some of our social channels, and so at this point we're going to conclude today's presentation. If you have any questions in terms of ChatGPT, don't hesitate to reach out to the Brian Marketing Group. Mike is more than happy to have those conversations. If you're looking to understand more about measuring that ROI and we can be of service, or some of our free tools that are on our site, you want a free consultation, don't hesitate to reach out to one of our sales reps to be able to provide you with some support there, more along the lines. We refer to them as solutions consultants at the Brian Marketing. And at the same time, if you want to get more insight into some of the things that HubSpot can do for you from a sales and marketing automation component, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can walk you through a demo. We can collaborate with Nicole to come up with those great ideas of how we can better service you and share some of those outstanding use cases based upon the financial services industries. Everything from banks to credit unions to financial advisors to debt consolidation. We've got some of those things for you. And with that, we will give you 5 minutes back in your day. And thank you very much. And I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining the webinar, folks. Bye now.